Okay, so today we are going to be talking about using backend APIs. So previously, I believe last week, we used APIs in a certain way. So we called our API from the front end. So the front end made a request to an API, and then that API returned that request back to the front end. So we just used JavaScript and we used Axios to call an API, and that API then returned our response, and then we displayed it. So today we're going to see how we can send our data our requests from the front end to our back end, then to the API, which then sends the response back to the back end, and then to our front end. So we're pretty much building like a middleman that will handle the API requests and then send it back to the front end. So the front end will request something from the back end. The back end will go out to the API, or the back end will call the API request, receive the data back, put it in a form that our front end would want it, and then we would send it back to the front end. So why do this? Why do an extra step? Why would we need to even have an API go through the back end when we can just go through the front end? There are a few reasons. So two of them we will be discussing today, and it's mainly so it's mainly security reasons. So one of the reasons why we might want to do this is that some APIs require authentication. And when you do this authentication, you usually have a secret key that you want to keep private. So using the backend will allow you to use environment variables to hide your secrets, and we will see that towards the end of the lesson today. And this is one of the main reasons why you would want to put your code to call the APIs in the backend. Nothing that you put on the front end is secret. It all gets sent through the interwebs everywhere. You can see it from a browser very easily, human readable. So this is one main reason. Another one is some APIs are simply inaccessible by the front end. So there's a policy called the same origin policy. And so having the same origin policy and lack of ports, which we've seen before, which is the cross origin resource sharing. Okay, what the hell does this mean? So SOP, same origin policy, pretty much, let's actually look it up. Let's see what this means. I forgot to bring down the browser. Okay. So same origin. I'm not typing. So the same origin policy is basically a mechanism built into your browser that protects requests coming back from a place that is not the same as the origin sender. So if we make, so what an origin is basically like the base URL, including, oops. So this would be an origin. It's the base URL with the protocol, and pretty much your browser will check when you make a request to something. So I'm making a request to, let's say, this developer Mozilla site, but my origin is coming from my localhost app that I just built. So I'm able to send out that request, but when the response comes back, my browser will block it and say, we're not going to allow you to see this because this is coming from an origin. This is coming from a source that is not the same as the origin request. So the way around this is something called CORS. So it's cross-origin resource sharing is an HTTP header that if a server sets it to allow the origins, then your browser will allow those requests to come in. So when we looked at the free APIs, I'm gonna put the Pokemon one because we know that that one worked. This one, right? I think. Oh, this one. Okay. So I guess it says unknown. This one is for authentication. There was no authentication. This one is the course policy. So this would most likely be a yes. So I'm trying to find something that would allow. So basically when cross-origin resource sharing is a yes, that means that it will allow you to call it from wherever. So if I went to my Pokemon API, I make this call. I'm just gonna do that, this in here, and let me inspect the network real quick. Okay, so in the response headers, I have this set here. This is one of the headers that comes back from the server, and it's saying that so access control allow origin. This is what allows the data to come through, even though it's not coming from the same origin as me. So I am on my machine. I am not the same origin as the Pokemon API, but because they have this header set, that means that I can get the data even though I'm not from the same origin. So this is how certain APIs can get around it. A lot of APIs do not want this to be allowed for anyone because it's possibly a security risk. So it's usually not there. So if I choose a different API, so today we're gonna use this other API. Let's see, API. I just want a simple query, please. Where's their base URL? Okay, I'll grab it later. But when we query an API that does not have this access control allowed, you won't be able to access it from a front end, from a browser. So that's why you will have to go through the backend and do things that way. Any questions on this?
Is there ever a time when sensitive information can or should be shared by an API?
So it can be, and those usually require authentication, first of all, and then as well as you won't be able to access it from a front end, from front end requests, you would have to send a backend request. So that's probably how they would add those extra levels of security. So these are, yeah, the SOP, this is meant to be like a security policy. Same with the cores. So when you're allowing any origin, that means that it is open to anyone to make requests. And that means that your data is not sensitive. You don't really care about whoever makes the request. It's just open to anyone and everyone. Versus if you care about how many requests are being made and you want to make sure that a person has an API key that they get first and stuff like that, you might want to put it in the backend, or they would want it to be secure and called from a backend source. Yeah. So yeah, by default, when you send an AJAX request, so like we're using Axios, stuff like that, browsers will only use the responses from servers in the same origin as you, with the exception of when the access control origin header is set to star, and star means everything pretty much. It's a wild card. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, so now that we understand that, so there are these are basically the reasons why we would need to go through the backend to call certain APIs. Okay, so the process for acquiring and using an API key can be different from one place to another. So some places some places don't even have authentication. Some of them require OAuth, and each one of these will tell you exactly how to access their API. So there's no way to kind of say like, this is how it's always going to be. Each one sets their own rules in a way. So the API key is a unique key that will be associated with your developer account. So you usually create a developer account with whoever, and I'm going to open up the Noun API again, actually, or the Noun project. So just some background, this is just an API that gives you images and icons for things. So you can look up donut, and it will send back a list of icons that are all donuts. It's pretty cool. They're just any word you can think of. There's images. So yeah, we'll be using this one today. But yeah, so this API requires us to sign in. So we're gonna have to, let me put the documentation link up from, oh, that was wrong, sorry. That is not what there we go. Okay, so this is the getting started page for the Noun project. And it's just going to detail that you want to create an API key. You have to create an account, and then when we log into the account, we'll be able to see our to create an application and then generate the keys, which I'll go over in a bit. Then it tells you, like, for authentication, we use OAuth 1, and you have to use your stuff. So it gives you information as you keep going on. For making requests, this is your base URL. This is your origin. And then this is, yeah, so this is your base API endpoint. All these words are kind of, what's the word? Not similar. You know what I mean, like they all kind of mean the same thing. And there's reference to their more of their public API points and stuff like that. Supported file formats. So it's telling you that all the requests will return a JSON response or an error. And some examples of the status codes would be these. Pricing, there's different plans, but it's free for our uses. Acceptable uses. And then they give you sample code for using the API and making a request. So we'll be using this today and seeing how we can interact with that. And then they have like certain tools that have been built by the community to help with programming. So if you notice here, JavaScript is not one of these. So this tool does not want or cannot be used by the front end. So it is only accessible by backend processes. Okay, so let's go back up. We wanted to get our API key. I clicked on this, so visit the app management page. This is what it opened up. I'm already logged in, I have an account. So here I've created an app. So this app is not an actual application, but it's just for categorizing and organizing. So for this application that I want to test here, or for my demo today, I'm going to use this one. And you scroll all the way down, and then you have your keys. So this is your public key, and this is your secret. I will regenerate these after after this lesson. But yeah, so when you want to regenerate, you can just click on this. So some APIs or some API documentation offers an explorer, so you can test out your API before you even put it into your code, so you can see what it returns. So if I wanted to, let's say, put my key here, so I can put my API key, my secret here, and then I can click on any of these. So if I wanted to get an icon with an ID, let's say 34, try it out. This is what I get as a response. And I can just look at the data, see what it is. And this is the icon URL, I believe, that I can view. So I can just see what that looks like. And it's just a big arrow. So yeah, some APIs are nice that they have like a built-in browser thing. So one thing you have to notice, they say here that using this Explorer will actually count towards your API call limits. And it mentioned the limits up here. So I have 5,000 calls a month, which hopefully I won't get to that point. Okay, so let's try to see how we can add this into code. Any questions actually on APIs? And I know we haven't delved into too much, but this specific one. Okay. Let's see. So one thing that I want to make sure I mention, and I will mention this often, you do not want to put your API keys or your secrets in GitHub. never push them to GitHub. And I will show you how to not do that. But yeah, you have to make sure that you keep them safe. Okay, so we are going to start a Django project. See if I remember how to do this. I've done this many times now. We're just gonna reuse one, honestly. Use my test environment, and then activate. Okay, so now I'm on. I don't need to do pip install because I already have installed it with this one. Just to make sure, I'm gonna just type Django or Python-m Django. Okay, so Django exists. Let's start a project. So Python-m Django start project. And what should we call this? I have no idea. I'm just gonna call it API, backend API project. So does anyone remember, is the underscore the correct one, or is it the underscore? Let's see. You're right, it worked. Okay, so now we're gonna cd into what we just created. And then I'm going to create an app. So I'm gonna start app, and I'm gonna call it API app. Okay, so now we should have our stuff here. I'm gonna do some of the project setup. So I usually start in the settings. I add my installed app, which is API app. Saving that. Gonna add the static directories because I know that I'm gonna end up using it today. Does anyone remember the syntax of this? It's okay if you don't, I'm looking it up.
Tax for what?
The syntax to set the static directories.
Nope, don't remember that one.
Yep, it's okay. There we go. It's here. So static file underscore dirs equals us list, and it's gonna be not that. So in that list, it's gonna be base directory slash static, lowercase static. Okay. So again, this allows me to create a static folder here that will that I can put my JavaScript or my CSS, and it will know where to find that information. So I'm gonna just create a folder real quick. And the static folder has to be the same at the same level as your manage.py. So if I look at the folder organization here, I can see this is so my app, my my project module folder here, and then I have my static folder. And then in this, I'll create a JavaScript folder, and within that, main.js, just because I know I'm going to use it later. Okay, so I hooked that one up. What else do I need to use or do to set up my project? Pop quiz.
You got to set your views and URLs.
Okay, let's do that.
And this is also the most confusing part to me. I'd love it if you went nice and slow.
I would definitely. Okay, so I'm gonna start with, so right now we just started our project, so we only have a urls.py in our project folder. So what we want is to create one in our app as well. So I'm gonna create a urls.py. And the structure of this one will be similar to this. So I'll just copy these. I'm not going to use everything in there, but I'm going to use the general structure of it. So I don't need the admin page. And let's say I don't need this one. Yeah. So this is just the bare bones of what a urls.py should look like. So if I go into, this is the project urls.py, so this one still has the admin information. I'm going to add a path for my app here. So I'm going to say that the base path is going to immediately go to all my app requests. So anything that starts with a base will go to my my app urls.py. And so to do this, I have to import something called include. So this will allow me to include all the URLs that are in this file here into this file here. So instead of having all of them written out one right after the other, this is just allowing us to section it off and make it a little more easier. And this would come in handy if we have multiple applications within this project. So
If you backtrack like 15 seconds, you said between what two files here and there?
yeah, so we have two url.py files. So let me close that. Okay, so this one is the one that comes built into the project. And it usually just has an admin and it has some information here on the URL patterns in general. So like what to do with it and stuff like that. So I created one in my apps folder. So API app urls.py. And here I'm actually going to hold the path to the things that I connect to the views. So remember, we write views to handle our requests. So I can import views. And even though I didn't create anything right now, I can set, let's say I'm going to set an index page. So I'm going to choose that path to be the base path without anything there. And then I can say the function that will handle this is views.index. And I have not created the views.index yet, so that's my next step. So for Django to be able to read this file, because I just created it, I'm not connecting it anywhere, I have to connect it to the original urls.py by just saying include, and then I also forgot the syntax for this one. It's just include, and then it's the app name. So I called this one API app, and then dot URLs. So it's saying take the API app module. So this became its own module here. So take this and find the URLs one and include it in our main URLs for this project. So these are the project URLs. We have an admin site, and then we have all the URLs that are defined for the API app. So as many as I add right here, I can add like 10 of them. They're all going to be included in our path, and Django will be able to interpret it because we have this line here. We included it into our project. Questions on this? Yeah, Louis.
I got a question. So, in the right, how does the Django know if you have multiple paths right there? Yeah, right
Mhm.
there. How does Django know which one you're talking about specifically, like the homepage?
So it depends on what you have here. So if I had something that says home and then something that is base. So if I go to localhost 8000, it will first go to the project URLs here. It'll open this. That shouldn't have opened. So it'll open the project URLs. It'll look at these and then say, do I have an /admin? No, I don't. Do I have just the base URL, which is like localhost 8000? Yes. So what that means is we're going to go into the API app URLs, and then we're going to try to find the interpretation there. So then the request goes to here. And then it tries to match pretty much the pattern. Since we don't have anything after the 8000, after that like base URL, then this first one will execute. If we had /home after it, then this one would execute. So use.home, and I will create these and then show them one more time, or yeah, show them real quick. So close that out. So now if I create a view, so here I'm importing the views, right? This is the app URLs. So if I define, I'm going to need to define two of them, index and home. So if I define index with the request, and then return, I'm going to return an HTTP response here. So from Django.http for HTTP response. Okay. And then here I'm going to say, this is index, and then I'm going to create the same one for home. So I'm going to call this home. This is home. And so now if I have a base path, so nothing after the slashes, it'll interpret it. It'll go to the index one. If not, it's going to go to the home one. And yeah, let's test it out. So I'm going to do Python manage.py and then run server. Okay, no errors, we like that. I'm going to go to localhost. Okay, so this is the index. I don't have anything, I don't have any slashes after my base URL. So if this website was deployed, it would have, this would be like mydomain.com or something like that. So that is what the base URL is. And then if I put /home, it's going to say this is home. So what happens with /home is, where is it? It goes here, it doesn't find the admin, so it's going to end up, it's going to end up going in here to see if anything matches, because this is not matching a specific one. It's just kind of nothing right now, which is a little different than this one, because this one is only going to go into this function if it is empty. So even if we have home, it's not matching like a specific thing. So if I wanted this path to be APIs /, it would only go into the API URLs if it was API /. But because it's empty, it's gonna try to check in here as well. I know this part is a little confusing, that this one's empty, but it's still going into it, but that's just because it's going into it because nothing else matched out here, and the include will probably have more in there. Okay, good. Did that answer your, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, Eric.
Yes, really quickly, I think I missed it. What was the reasoning for making a separate URLs.py inside of the app?
So this one is for organization. So if you have multiple apps, or when you have multiple apps, things get a little muddled if you have like the first app's APIs and then the second app's APIs, and they're all on the same page. This is just a Django pattern. There are certain things that we do in Django just because it is designed that way, so it's easier to use it.
Okay, that makes sense. And if you were to have a second one inside of your I guess, what is it, the parent URLs.py, how would you put in the second one? Is it just like comma and then you just write the
Here?
path of the second one, or?
Yeah, so so if I had a different app and this app goes to, even if it's empty, honestly, as long as these ones don't match any of the ones in the third app, in the second app, then this will be okay. So you might have collisions if you have the same routes, but so let's say this one is app2 / and then you can include the other app. So you can include app2.urls. And all the requests that have app2 at the front of it will go into the second app's URLs.
Okay, cool, thanks.
All right, so we've set up our URLs. We know that our website is working, it's hooked up. So that's great. There's quite a bit of setup, I know. So I'm going to create just a folder for my templates. So we'll make just a simple HTML index.html. Nothing too fancy today. Okay, here I'm just going to put an H1 the API test. All right. So let's say when we go to our main index, we want to call our API to grab some information. So let's go back to the documentation so we can grab the code that will get us started. So I'm back here on the getting started page. I know this one's going to be my base URL and here. So I'm going to need to import these two libraries. So requests is going to be a library kind of similar to Axios in the way that it allows us to create requests. So I'm just going to copy over this code and we'll go over it and what it's doing. Keep pressing this. Okay. So I'm going to import requests, and I'm also going to import requests OAuth library, which allows us to do the authentication. This code I'm going to want to put inside of my index because that is when I want it to execute. Okay. What else do I want to do? So here we have two words that are very similar. So we have the request that's coming in to our method because of just the HTTP requests. And then there's a library that we're using that is called requests. So when you have this, just to avoid confusion, I would give it an alias. So we can call it HTTP client or something like that. Copy, and then instead of that, I can just say HTTP client.get, because that's basically what it's doing. It's getting information. Okay, so first you have to set your authentication object. I believe this creates an authentication object, and you're going to put your API key and the API secret right here. So if I go back to my developer portal, I think that copies it. Let's find out. Nope, it did not. There we go. Okay, so I have my key and I have my secret, and I have the endpoint that I want. So this is the base URL, and then I'm going to grab the first icon. So icon with ID 1, which, yeah, that's just based off of these. So /icon/ID, I can just get whatever ID I want. I can try 75. Okay, so what this request library allows us to do is we can, kind of similar to Axios, where we say axios.get, this is the same way. So we're gonna call our library.get, we're gonna send in the endpoint, so our URL, and then we're also going to send in the authentication information. And it's going to send us back a response. We don't have to do any async await stuff. And then we can just print out the content and we'll see it here. So let us trigger that. So we're going to go to the base. Did I not have? Okay. So no module named requests. Why do you guys think so? Can anyone give a guess of why this one isn't working? Someone said to restart the server. When I restarted the server, it still gives me this error. Let's save. That might help. So let's save. See, nope, still getting an error. Put line 4 on line 1. No, that shouldn't matter. These are all imports, so they'll all be fine. Yes, Cameron, that is true. That is correct. It is not installed. So I don't have this library installed in my version of Python. So Python's will not know what this is. So what I have to do is I stop my server. I'm gonna do pip install requests. I think it's just called requests. Let's Google it. Oops. Yeah, it's just requests. Sometimes they add words or something to it. Okay, pip install requests. All right, and I think I need to install this one too. This is a great, like this I don't know how to pronounce this, but this is a good place to find what the library installation ones are. I'm pretty sure it's this one. Request.
Now, this is just for your virtual environment. This isn't actually your local machine that we're adding stuff to, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, because my virtual environment is on over here.
Okay.
And if I wanted to use a different virtual environment tomorrow, this is where I would have to do pip freeze. That way, I will have these requirements set for me. So now you saw before, we usually only have 3. Now we have a longer list because I added a few requirements today. Yeah, so whenever you add something with pip, you have to redo your requirements. So sometimes people don't do it in the beginning of the project, they do it towards the end, or like as they install more dependencies. Will okay, so
That hit freeze, will that overwrite the requirements.txt? So like, if you found out later on that you had to install another library, will it overwrite the original? Okay.
it will, yeah. Yeah, the entire file will be overwritten. Okay, oh, I didn't start my server, that would have helped. Okay, start our server. We get our data, we're not printing it out anywhere or returning it. So now we have this. It's really hard to see. So I'm going to show you another library that will allow you to see it a little better. And this is called Pretty Print. So print. I believe I have to install this as well. We will find out. And actually we'll get into that later. Yeah, Kayla.
Just to go back to the requirements, do we generally create the requirements folder after we've installed what we need to install?
Yeah. So a lot of times you end up installing most of the things that you think you need in the beginning. So that's why people get into the habit of doing that in the beginning. And then as you install things, you can redo it.
Okay.
Yeah. Or at least before pushing it to GitHub. That is, yeah, that's a good practice. Okay, so we were able to make our noun project API call, which is great. So yeah, so if we had made this API call using Axios, it would not have worked because of the same origin point or the same origin principle and the cores. Yeah, so this only works here in the backend. Okay, so we retrieved this response, and what does this response have? Oops. Gonna refresh this page so I can get the response again. And let me refresh. Okay, so it just gives a response object with a status of 200. So it's kind of hard to understand what's in there, which is a little annoying, but we can also say response.json. This will give us a JSON version of the response. So that was similar to the response.content, but this one puts it in a JSON object that allows us to access it. So if I said response JSON equals this, I can do response JSON at icon. Oops. And then it prints out whatever was at the icon. Yeah, it's a little hard to hear. It's a little hard to see all of this. So that's why sometimes we get help from a different library. So this library will allow us to see it in a better way, see like a couple levels down. So for this one, I'm gonna just do a configuration for this real quick. So preprint that pretty printer, and then so indent indent is the number of spaces to indent for each level of nesting. So it'll when it's printing it out, it'll kind of make an indentation so you can see what's what, and then depth is how many levels deep to go into the object. So 2 is generally good to, like, you'll be able to see generally what this information is about, and then you can know where you want to traverse yourself through through all of this code. So you can, I'm gonna use print. Actually, it's just because I named this here, so print. It's a little unintuitive that like there's a pretty printer object within this, and then yeah, but this is just, these 2 lines are what we need to know for this one. And I'm going to print out the response JSON, and let's see the difference between the dump data that we saw earlier and this one. So now this is what it looks like. So the response returned all of this information here. Tags, ID, it returned, oh, it started up here. So icon, and then inside the icon, there's an object that has more information. So if I wanted to print out something, icon, let's see what it'll return. Okay, so it returned the information that was inside of the icon itself. So if I want to say access the icon URL, so I'm going to put another square brackets, and then I see that I have access to icon URL now. So icon URL. So this is a good way to explore your data and kind of debug as you go. So now let me refresh and clear. Let me clear my, oops. One sec. I wanted to clear my terminal. Okay, there we go. So on URL, save this. And now if we refresh. We got a bunch of information. So this requires a little playing around with, but oh, it's because I'm printing these twice. That's my bad. Okay. Figured why it's still messy. Okay, now if I refresh, I only got the URL itself now. So if I copy this over and I try to use it, so let's say I put it in an image tag or something like that. Now I have a picture of an airplane. So this is how you can access the data within the response, just with the square brackets. Questions? So the gist of this is you set up your authentication, you decide what your endpoint is going to be. So what kind of data you want to retrieve. I want to retrieve an icon with an ID 85 now. And obviously this endpoint can be built based on information that's coming in. So if I had this function coming in with parameters, I can take that parameter and then stick it in here and then have it be a little more dynamic. So we set up our authentication, we set up our endpoint, and then we call our requests client to get the data from this endpoint using this authentication, and then it gives us back a response. And with this response, you can grab like a JSON version of it pretty much. And that makes it a little more easy to grab information from. So I can just use the square brackets to identify like the pieces of information that I want. And this library, the pretty print, is pretty much just going to allow us to view the data a little more easier in the browser. I mean, in the terminal here. Okay, questions?
I have a quick one. So
Mhm.
this is just kind of like what we did yesterday with like the models.py, where like we had the classes pulling all the information, but now we're doing it in the views because we're pulling it from a different API instead of like from our actual device or storage.
Yeah, when we talk about models later, I think later in the week, yeah, I think Friday, we'll talk more about conventions. So you can honestly put that code in the views, or you can put it in the models. I was reading a book about like Django best practices, and there's this principle of fat models, skinny views, or something like that, where you want to put a lot of your data grabbing in your models, versus your views is just like kind of like an orchestrator, so it will call your models. We'll talk more about that like when it comes to that, but basically what it comes down to, these are all Python files, right? So the Python files are different because it's kind of forcing us into a way of organizing this code. But when it comes down to it, it's all Python files. So as long as something is being called from somewhere, it will be executed. So if I had put this function in my models.py and I had imported the models into my URLs, it would have worked, because I'm just essentially importing a function that I'm saying will handle this information. So the actual files themselves are arbitrary to the program, but for us, they're a way of organizing our projects. So yeah, we'll definitely talk more about the organization of where this information should be. But since we're not using models at the moment, I know you guys had to do it yesterday for the assignment, but because we're going to be using databases, the models are going to look a little bit different. So yeah, well, for right now, you can keep this information here in your views, and then we'll talk about organizing things different later.
Okay, that makes sense.
Kayla?
Oh, I was gonna ask, I don't know if I missed it, but what exactly, where you set the pretty print variable, what exactly does the indent and the det do?
So indent is what it will show us here. Like, so if it's on the first level of, so you know how JSON data or object data is a lot of times leveled. So they're layered. So there's one layer and then there's another layer within that. So the indent is just to say between each level, how many spaces should I put in the console when I'm printing. The depth is how many levels down should I go inside the actual object that I'm trying to print. So I'm sending it this response.json, right? So when I'm trying to print it out, if I have, so let me show you the example again. So if I'm just printing out the response itself, I'm going to my local host. Okay, so this is what is coming back. So this is the first level of information that it sends back, and it's only sending back something with icon. So the first thing that you would probably have to do is say response JSON icon, but then the second level under icon is going to be all these attributes pretty much.
Okay.
So if I change this to level 3 or depth 3, if I trigger it again, it will give me some more information. So this is the first level, this is the second level. And if I keep scrolling down, this one has a third level. So it has an object within an object within an object.
Okay.
And it just tells us that information. Yeah. Zach.
Yeah, so my question was, I understand that we're just using like grabbing the icon as an example of, you know, how we're making all this work.
Mhm.
But this seems like a really difficult way to get an icon. So I guess kind of what use do we typically have of this? Like, how does this fit into, like, is this how we're going to be grabbing icons? It seems like it would be easy to just like, you know,
No,
make
this
an
is-
image for something.
No, this API was chosen because it is a well-documented API. It's a good one to use, and it's kind of fun to just generate random pictures. So it doesn't just have to return icons, it can also return images. So here's, let me close that one. I guess it's mostly icons. I don't know what collections are, but let's just put 35. I think it returns like a bunch of them. So it doesn't just return a singular one. Yeah, it returns like types of icons or something like that. But yeah, this is just an API that was chosen to experiment with it and play around. This is, if you want to grab your, like you saw earlier when I was looking through the actual icons, I can just say donut and it'll send back. So you can search by keyword, not just the ID. So if I search this, I'm getting back a bunch of them. I'm getting back like 3,896 icons. So maybe on your website, you're really into donuts and you want every single picture to be a different donut image. And maybe you just query this API once, and then you can loop through and always have a different icon or something like that. But yeah, this is just for practice and for showing how to like look through docs. This has a good like browser explorer, so you can make your requests through here and it'll actually build it here. So if you want a maximum number of 3 results, you can put it here, and then if you try it out, it'll build the URL for you, and you can just copy that and paste it into your program. Or you can see how it's being done and then implement it in your program using like interpolation if you're grabbing parameters from some sort of outside source, which is like the user, not a complete outside source. Did that make sense? Did it answer your question? Okay, awesome. Yeah, Eric.
Regarding the APIs, when we were doing the one with the Pokemon API, we were able to look in the console and have like the drop downs and to locate all of the spots. So we didn't need like the depth 2, 3 and stuff like that. And I found that to be like pretty easy to just like use the arrows to drop down and stuff. Is there no way to do it like that anymore? And we have to do the pretty printer with the inside console?
So with this, yeah, because so that was in the front end. That was printing to the console, and that console had a built-in like thing where you can click through objects. For Python, since it's just running in our terminal, it's going to be a little difficult to just click through. We can send the data back to the front end, and then we can print it on the console. So that was going to be the next part of our experiment. So we're just going to try to return this information to a page and then display it.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's the way I can think of doing that. Other questions?
Really quick, so this information you're just printing out to the console just for to show us what it's pulling out, but this is the stuff you would put in through However, like what we were doing yesterday to print it into our actual thing and start
Yeah.
layering it when we want to pull it and all that.
Yeah, so when you're trying to implement this, when you're trying to implement an API call and stuff like that, this is a way for you to explore the data also. So you will end up having to look at the data, see what it returns. Like I said, some APIs are good where you can actually explore that here. You can see everything that's being returned. Some APIs are not that good, and some of them kind of suck, and you won't know fully what information you get until you make the call and then you retrieve the information. So yeah, this is purely for debugging and exploration purposes, but it will help a lot with finding the information that you're looking for. Other questions? Okay, now we're back. So before the break, we grabbed, we were able to grab some information from this API. We called it to grab an icon with ID 85, and then, yeah, we were able to retrieve some information back. Okay, so let's actually return this information to a page. So I created a template over here. And I don't really have much here. I am going to create an image tag. And the source is going to be equal to data that I'm going to return. So let's call this I don't know, preview URL or like image URL. So now I have to name my actual data this, or I have to give it a key. So here, instead of an HTTP response, now we are going to render a page. So I'm going to send in what that page is. Oh, actually, first it's telling me that I have to send in the request, which I forgot. So request is our first parameter. Our HTML page name is the second. So we saw yesterday that because I had it in a second folder, I had to specify what that folder's name was before I put the file name. But here, since I put everything directly in templates, I can just say that I want to render index.html. And then the data that I want to return, I want to return the URL. So there's a preview URL that is right here. It's probably better to grab that one. So I'm just gonna grab it from my JSON response. So response underscore JSON. So my first level that I have to drill into is icon. So I have to go into icon, and then I have to go into preview URL. Okay. And this should give me the URL that I'm looking for. And then I can just send this one into our page, our HTML page. So I'm going to send back an object. So there's a few ways of doing this. You can define the object before and then just send it in with the variable name, or you can just create it here. So I'm going to call it whatever I am expecting. So image URL here. I'm going to say image URL. And I'm going to send in the URL that I had just retrieved. Okay. So what will happen is when I go to my homepage, not the one that is /home, but like the base page. It will go through, it'll authenticate, grab my information. Then I will grab my URL here and I will send it into the index.html page to be rendered. And I should see it in the form of an image because actually, let me make sure that I did. Yeah, I didn't close my image tag. Do we need a closing tag here? No. Okay. Let's save this. Go back here, refresh, and there we go. Now we have a boat. So can someone walk me through exactly what happened when I click this? I know it's a little repetitive, but just to make sure we're on the same. Who would like to volunteer?
I can try it. So you go into your when that's basically like calling mydomain.com. So if you go into your URLs page in the main folder, it goes to that second line 21 there.
Okay.
And it goes into your app.urls. And you're still at the root. So it calls views.index.
Okay.
Or points to it, I guess. So in views.index, there's the index function is what it's calling. So it takes your authorization and your endpoint and puts all that into your HTTP client, which is basically just an alias that you gave to response. I think I can't remember what you renamed to HTTP client.
The requests.
Request, yeah. So you renamed request HTTP client. It feeds that stuff in there. And then you rename some stuff basically. So you have your JSON, your object that is, sorry. You've renamed to response _ JSON, and then your URL, you're pointing to that icon preview URL, and then you're calling a return render for it. So it's showing index.html, and the data that you're passing in is the URL. So when you go to your index.html, you've got an image tag, and you're pulling in the image URL, which is the key for the object that you made that has that information, or that URL rather.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. That was great. Any questions about the flow of these things?
I just have a quick question about the index HTML file. So you're using that variable or placeholder like image URL. I know you didn't define it here because we defined it in views when we constructed the object to feed it through, but there's nothing that you got to import to the HTML file or anything. It just works.
Yeah, so
Okay.
this is because this is a template file that is like Django specific. I know it's an HTML file, but because it's within Django, it has the extra functionality of having access to the variables that we send into the page when we render it or something like that. So if we wanted to check if this is here, we can have that like an if statement code block. So if image URL, then this will be our image. And actually, I'm gonna have an else here. Else, I'm gonna say image not found or something like that, or no image or whatever you want to say. I don't know why I'm struggling to close this. Okay. So if I didn't send anything here, let's save this. I go here, I'm gonna say it's gonna say image not found, because there was nothing that was sent in that matched what I was looking for. So that's the way that you can make sure that you have information pretty much and not like break things. Okay, so there's a bunch of different ways to like bring data back and forth between the front end and the back end, and we'll see a lot of that. For now, yeah, actually, I saw a hand go up. Who was it? Or yeah, we'll answer a question and then I think Louis, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Can you explain to me again how like the relation between like the views and the index HTML, like how are you calling it?
Yeah, definitely. So where the connect happens is at this line. So line 22, the function render is allowing us to render an HTML page as our response. So these functions get called when we get a request, right? We get a request from the browser that we want I want the index to happen, or I want like the base to happen. So this render function, when I'm returning, allows me to show a page pretty much. And I can also not only show the page, which I have defined previously, but I can also send in data to that page straight from this function. So that is exactly what I'm doing. So I'm grabbing the data that I need to send into the page. I'm getting it ready for the page to use. And then I'm going to use the render function. I'm going to send in the request that I had received. I'm gonna specify the name of the page that I'm gonna open, and then I'm gonna send in the data that the page would probably need to like display things. Yeah. Did that make sense, or was that? Do you have any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. That was
yeah, Eric.
So for like a regular more complex web page, is the index just going to be like a crap ton of lines of variables, and then you're like in your render where image URL is, there's going to just be like tons of stuff within that dictionary in order to hold all of that information? Like if you want multiple links, multiple pictures and all of that, it's just going to be this giant.
It depends how much information you want to send in, but yes. So it doesn't have to be like a list like this. It could be maybe everything. So I can structure my data here. Everything related to an icon is going to be within this object. And this object maybe has image URL, and the URL is here. And then it has like different data fields. And then if you have like more information on something else, then you would add, let's say this is for an image. And then the information will be here. So yeah, there is some structuring to the data. And then at the end, you can just send in data. But yeah, typically you are going to be structuring data to be returned to whoever's calling. That is kind of what an API is, and you're essentially building an API here. You're building the ability to process an HTTP request and do what needs to be done, and then returning either a page render, or you can even return an HTTP response. You can return data in the form of a JSON response, which we'll see at a different time, but yes.
Okay,
It all depends on
thank
what
you.
the page needs. Yeah, and actually, so sometimes you're not even sending the data, which we'll see I'm not sure when we'll see this. Maybe I'll do a breakout session today. But you're not always going to be rendering a page. Sometimes you get this you get a request. So this one is based off of the index. So whenever we go to the index page, it gets called. But you could also have a JavaScript file. So let's say you have a button on your HTTP page, on your HTML page. And that button is hooked up to an onClick function that will get icon. Okay. And this information, I forgot how to define a function in JavaScript. Ignore that.
You can just function, get icon, or you could do, if I don't know if you're trying to do the arrow function or not.
I think I was, but I didn't know what I was doing. Okay. So let's say this function gets called when you click on a button, and then this function will grab like there's an input form on this main page where you can type a word, and then you click a button and this function gets called. You access that word that was typed in, and then you send it to your backend using an Axios call. So you can say, you can have like a route defined. So let's say our route is going to be slash icon slash the name of the icon that we had received. So let's say it's dog. Okay, so slash icon slash dog. And let's say we're handling the response correctly. So response equals something, but I know there's like the dog then or whatever Axios needs. So let's simplify this. We want to call the backend to get this information from our backend API. So we call this, that means that this URL here has to be defined in here. So then we create a new path, right? So path, and this URL is going to be, what did I put? Icon slash, and this is going to be a parameter, let's say. So this is a string, and I'm going to call this name. So I want the icon and a name, and I should be sending back information. So, and this would be views dot get icon. Okay. So now I will create a get icon here. So define icon. And this will send in the request. And we're also getting in a name. So when that gets called, this will get triggered. I can make my API requests here. So I'm just gonna copy this real quick. Okay. So I do my authentication, I grab my information here. I want to use this name instead of the icon, like here. So I can just have the name be here, because I'm pretty sure if I set like dog here, this will work. Let me just make sure I'm not breaking this. So this is just here. Oops. I'm just going to return. Okay. This is not actually going to get called right now because I don't have anything hooked up. But if I call this. Did I? Okay, I'm sending in the data. Oh. So that's because it's only looking for this. So I'm just gonna update that. That's not relevant right now, but okay. So you can also, so you don't have to just put an ID here. You can actually put a name of something here, and it'll return an icon. Okay, so let's say I set up my endpoint. I'm grabbing the name that was sent in from the JavaScript. I then will use that endpoint to get a response from the noun project. And then I'm going to use this JSON response, and I'm going to send it back. So up here, I'm going to get JSON response, and I'm going to return a JSON response. And the data is just going to be my response JSON. Underscore JSON. And so what will happen is this information gets sent back to our JavaScript file in the form of a response. So after it resolves, so my server, so this is where the front end talks to the back end. So front end is JavaScript and HTML, and then back end is your Python. So our front end made a request to our backend using this URL, because this is a URL that we had defined in here, right? Icon / a string. And when that gets called, our getIcon function gets triggered. We are in here now. We use that name in our endpoint. We get a response that is specific to that name. And then we can send that back to whoever made the request. And whoever made that request was our front end. It's our own front end here doing the Axios call. I'm gonna do a dot then just so it's proper. Oops. That then, and then within here, we're getting our response. And then we can just console.log this response. Okay. So there are a lot of reasons why this is not going to work at the moment, because first of all, I don't have my script hooked up. So I'm gonna just add a header here. Head tag and then a body tag. I'll put everything in the body tag. So with Django, you don't always have to put these, and it kind of just knows to interpret things correctly without having the head and the body. But if you want to put this information, then you should have a head and a body. And I just want to put my script up here. Close the script tag. Okay. It's a source, I believe. And then I put what was it? Static. So it's going to be in my static folder /JavaScript/main.js. So this is the script that I have written here. Okay. So that should load the script. Let's say I have a button. And I'm sorry for whoever was trying, who had a question that I haven't gotten to yet. Just hold on to the question and we'll get to it for sure. Okay, so on click, I am going to say that this is the function that I defined here. So get icon. Okay, so when we click the button, I would like an input as well. So input, I'm forgetting the syntax. I'm just gonna give it an ID right now. And then value equals, let's say this is my base value or cat. Okay, I think this is good. So when I write something in there, I'm gonna click on my button. It's gonna call this function, and that function is going to return. It's gonna go to Axios. Okay, I need to set up Axios. This is a long demo, but bear with me. Axios CDN. This one's, yeah, this one's good enough. I go back to my HTML page. I put it in here above my JavaScript script because it's going to, this one is going to use Axios, so it needs to be above it. It might, yeah, this might be, I'm pretty sure that it does have to have that. Okay, now I go back to my main.js. I am doing the Axios call. This all should be fine. I'm gonna console.log button was clicked. Okay. I should have been testing this along the way, but we're gonna see if it works. And if it does, then I'll explain exactly what happened. Because we're running out of time. Okay. So I had the value preset as cat, which is not a big deal. Oh, I'm not, okay. I understand what I'm doing wrong. So there was nothing wrong that just happened here, but I just remembered that I set up the mechanism to get input, but I'm not actually using the input in the Axios call. So I'm console logging. I'm going to I'm going to get the name of what I want to send in. Name is okay. Name equals document dot get element by ID, and that ID was called, I think, my input. And I think it's dot value. So this is the name that I want to look up, or this is my icon name that I would like to look in or grab. I forget this is JavaScript. Okay. And so I can add it in here. So let me change this, the weird ones. And then instead of dog, I'm going to insert my icon name. Okay. And so this is the request that I'm getting. This icon name is going to reach this get icon function, and the name parameter is going to come in, and then I'm going to look up whatever I want to look up. And I won't see this image on the page, but I will see it in the console, because when it goes back to main.js, I'm printing it to the console. So let's hope this works. I have high hopes. Okay, so I'm going to write fish. I'm going to click. Oh, I should have opened the console. So my button was clicked. Value fed request. So what was the
I think
request?
in the endpoint, you had icon / name, and then you're passing in the name as icon / name again. So you're going to icon / icon.
Here, so here.
Yeah,
I'm
so in your
calling-
views, I
Mhm.
think you have, yeah, right there. So
So the icon part is for this. So,
Mhm.
oh, I might have 2 slashes. Let me try that. I think the first slash didn't need to be there. Okay, let me try fish. Yay. Oh my God, it worked. I'm very surprised. And the data that I got back is this information. I'm going to look at the preview URL and hope that it is a fish. If it's not, I will be sad. Oh, what is that? That is not a fish, for sure. Sorry, I keep opening other tabs. Looks like a fish to me. Let me look up that and click on that. So what was returned? So icon. Let's look at this. It's sending back the same image. Okay, well, I'll debug this, but in theory, it works a little bit. Okay, let's go to here. And we should probably console log my icon name just to see what actually is getting returned, because it's very possible that it's not returning the right thing, which I wouldn't be surprised at all. Okay. Oh, it's returning cat. Okay, so I put fish. It's returning fish. Okay. So if I go back to my views, that's weird. So if I put fish here, should that not? It's returning a fish. Okay. So this is kind of a way to figure out what is happening. So I'm just gonna keep this as an ID here for this one. For this one, so it's the same icon. So let's see what's in name. Print name. Okay, then I click this. The printed out cat. So it is grabbing the correct thing. Yeah, so this is kind of like the process of debugging and figuring it out just by printing out stuff, which is not always fun. Can I print the endpoint? Wait one sec. I actually want to see if I put fish here, what will I retrieve? So that was called.
I think you might need to make the endpoint a formatted string.
Which one?
For the get icon, whenever we had the name in there, don't we have to add the F to the front of that string for the endpoint?
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you. I forgot about that. So that's why it was in red, but I just thought it was just red. I don't know. Yes, so that should have fixed it because we didn't have the format string, so it was taking a literal called name, which would probably make sense why there was like an ID card on it. So let's test this out. So I put cat. I really hope it's a cat image. It does say cat, so sounds promising or looks promising. Yay, it's a cat. We got a cat. Okay. And if we wanted to, then in this JavaScript, replace the URL of that image, then we can just either grab this image that already exists here and set the URL, or we can add another image onto the page. There's a bunch of things you can do with this. But that was a lot. I will go over exactly what happened again, but let me answer some questions first. Corbin?
Yeah, with the if else statement with the image,
Yeah,
instead of using the if else, could you just use an alt tag in the image tag?
yeah, you could. Yeah, that should work.
Sweet.
Other questions? Okay. Actually, one last thing before we do continue on with this. I didn't get to show you guys how to hide your secrets. So this is bad practice. Very, very bad practice. So one thing that allows us to keep secrets hidden is us creating a file called a .env file, .env, so environment. So this is where our environment variables can go. So we can set any key value pair over here. So let's say I want to set my environment to be dev. So if I want to use it in my program, I can easily check, okay, is my environment dev or is it production? So maybe on the server, you have a file that says .env, and in there, this would say prod. So that means that this file is in production. But if I'm running locally, I'm running in dev, let's say. So right now, the environment thing, we don't care about that one specifically, but we want to put our API key equals something. And then
does this need to be in the static folder?
It does not.
Okay.
It can be, yeah. It just has to be in your project folder, I believe. We'll get an error if anything, but it should find it. So you just set secret key. So you set a variable for each of these, and then you just copy over that information. For this one, we'll see. I don't think you have to put it in strings, but it might need that. Yeah, if it doesn't work, then we'll know that we need to put it in strings. Okay. So we're going to replace these because we're not supposed to have that in there. So we are going to need to install one more thing today. And that is going to be the python.env library. So this is the command line install command. So it's python.env. There's a Django one. Don't use that one. It's a little more complicated. Just stick to the python.env right now. Okay, so I installed it. I'm gonna restart my server. All right, so we have all these imports. I'm going to import from .env, import load, what is it called? Load.env. And this is not showing up yet because my file hasn't caught up to the fact that I imported something new. So it sometimes just takes a little bit of time. And I also need import OS. So this OS module, or I think it's a library, pretty much gives you information on what is in your system at the moment. So if I if I were to say, actually, I'm just going to print it out right here. So print OS. So this OS object has a bunch of information about the current environment that you're running on. So let me see if I can, if I just do this, that's fine. I got an error. I just want to see what OS. Okay, I'm gonna put this over here. And just so I don't get the weird errors, I'm gonna put this back here. Okay. Okay, so let's look at my OS object. This is so OS module. It's not giving us a lot of information, so that wasn't really helpful actually. I will show, oh wait, I think it's dot environment, yeah. So OS dot environment is what usually holds information. So let's scroll down, okay. Oops. So this gives you all the environment variables that you have on your local machine, pretty much. It gives you access to whatever you have on the computer. So I have like I have some paths. So you know how your computer has a path variable that holds paths to executables. So this is what allows your terminal to know that if you write code dot that I want to open VS Code. So somewhere in here, there's a code binary executable that allows it to automatically run. So this is just information about your environment that is set in here. So we created this .env file. And what we have to do is we have to call this. We have to call load.env. And this will take the environment variables from the .env and put it into our actual environment. And so to be able to access the API key that we set, so API key and the secret key, all we have to do is call os.environment square brackets with the name of what we're trying to grab. So if I print this one out now, I'm going to refresh. And now this is my key. This is the key that it grabbed. I know it's a little muddled with the rest of the outputs, but this is how we can access it now. So instead of having this long string, I can put this, and then I can put another one here for the secret key. So basically any name that you name this, you will have to access it with that same name. So this one can be API with a capital K key, and that means I would just have to have here capital K key. Okay, so let's see if this still works. Okay, API key was not there. It's because I didn't save this one. I forgot to do that. Okay, so now we're gonna load it again. Just gonna keep it with a lowercase k and lowercase k, secret key. Okay. There we go, it works. So it was able to authenticate properly and grab my API key and my secret key from this .env file because I called load.env. So I'm gonna just reiterate, I downloaded a library that allows me to write whatever environment variables I want into a file. And then when I call this function, it takes the environment variables from this file and loads them into my operating system environment variables. So then I would be able to access it through os.environment, and then I have to specify the name of whatever I'm trying to retrieve. And that is it. So if I copy these, oops, I should be able to replace this. And then it should work also for the button. So if I do this and I click this, I should, yep, I'm still retrieving data. Yeah, Chris.
So we capture our working environment with pip freeze, which is obviously like, our the major environmental changes. Is there any concern with like the libraries and keeping the libraries updated as we utilize them, across, Django and obviously our websites?
Yeah, sometimes you want to keep things at their current version, like keep libraries at their current version, just because if a new update has come in to that library and you don't, like, it breaks something in your code and you're not ready to handle it, you don't want it to immediately break. But in here, you can specify the name, so this is specifying which version this package is. But if you don't specify anything, it will probably get the latest one. Or I think you have to put like at latest, or I don't remember the exact syntax, but you can specify for it to grab whatever the latest version of this library, yeah, to grab it in. But the risk with that is just having libraries that break your code, like updates, I mean, that break your code. So one last thing that I wanted to mention, which is the whole part of why we put the .env here. In your file, in your projects, all the time you have to have a git ignore. I forgot if it's a .git ignore. Yep, .git ignore. And then you will put the name of the file. So .env will go in here. If there is like PyCache one, so __ PyCache. You don't want all of these extra files that happen when you run just hanging out in Git. There's no reason for that. And sometimes if you're working with other people and they have a different version of PyCache because they ran it on their machine, it'll cause merge errors that is just baseless. Like, you don't really need it. It doesn't need to happen because could have been avoided by just having it in the git ignore. But yeah, so now if I push my project, it's not my secrets aren't going to be online and they'll be on my local machine. So if you want to share secrets, you would have to like send it to someone who wants to use your code, and they will have their own .env file and they will be able to access the code or the secrets that way. Okay, I saw a lot of hands go up and then go down. So please ask questions. I know there's a lot and I kind of ran a little late today.
Mine was just going to be about how that environment was going to be not showing up, and you answered it right when my hand went up. So
okay, so other questions? Okay.